The last Arcturian battlecruiser drifted powerless, its hull breached in 17 places, atmosphere venting into the void like luminescent blood. Admiral Zex Torres stood on her flagship's bridge, 4 of her 6 limbs bandaged, watching tactical displays showing the death of a civilization that had stood for 50,000 years. "The children's evacuation ships?" she asked, voice barely audible. Her second-in-command lowered all 4 eyes. The Krell intercepted the last convoy near the Helios corridor. No survivors. Zex Torres' chromatophores flashed deep indigo, the Arcturian expression of mourning. After a century of warfare, her people's resistance ended not with a decisive battle but with this slow strangulation. The Krell Dominion's efficient brutality had finally prevailed. The terms arrived via quantum transmission, complete biological cataloging of all Arcturians for species reassignment, surrender of all technology beyond agricultural level, and extraction rights to occupy planets down to the mantle. As her diplomats prepared to accept these extinction with extra steps provisions, sensors lit up with anomalous readings. 7 vessels of unknown configuration dropped from faster-than-light travel, their hulls bearing unfamiliar markings. They broadcast on all frequencies. United Earth Fleet present to observe surrender proceedings under Galactic Sentient Rights Accord, Section 7. On his dreadnought, Krell High Commander Vexcare chittered with amusement, mandibles clicking. "The primates have sent observers." "Perfect. More witnesses to our ascendance." He transmitted permission, adding with cruel humor, "Perhaps we'll let them keep recordings for their own surrender day." The UEF Indomitable, lead vessel of the human contingent, moved into high orbit around Proxima Centauri IV. Its captain, Maya Chen, watched the devastation with outward calm that belied her internal fury. The Krell bombardment had reduced once gleaming Arcturian cities to radioactive glass. Environmental systems registered atmosphere toxicity levels incompatible with any carbon-based life. "Casualties?" she asked her science officer. "Conservative estimate. 4.7 billion on this world alone. Planetary ecosystem collapse in progress. Indigenous fauna extinction rate at 89.3% and accelerating." Chen nodded once, eyes never leaving the tactical display. Humanity had been observing the Krell-Arcturian War for decades, sending unmanned probes to document the conflict while maintaining strict non-intervention protocols. Earth's united government, still recovering from its own resource wars, had deemed direct engagement too risky. But something had changed. The scale of atrocity had finally triggered what human diplomatic circles called the Witness Protocol, humanity's solemn oath never to stand idle before genocide again. The formal surrender ceremony was scheduled for the following planetary rotation. The Krell, meticulous in their cruelty, had arranged for it to take place in the ruins of the Arcturian High Council chamber, once the center of their democratic governance, now a skeletal dome barely standing amid the wreckage. "Captain," her communications officer interrupted, "we're receiving a transmission from the Arcturian flagship. It's unusual. They're requesting a private channel." Chen raised an eyebrow. "Put it through to my ready room." Alone in her private chamber, Chen faced the holographic image of Admiral Zex Torres. The Arcturian's bioluminescent patterns pulsed weakly, a sign of extreme physical distress. "Human captain," the Admiral began, translator rendering her harmonic speech into English, "why do you observe our final humiliation? Is this some form of intelligence gathering?" Chen chose her words carefully. "We observe because memory matters, Admiral. History should record what truly happened here." "History is written by victors," Zex Torres replied. "And soon there will be no Arcturians left to remember differently." "There will be humans to remember," Chen said simply. The Arcturian studied her with all 4 eyes. "You risk Krell attention by coming here. They will target your worlds next, you know. Their appetite grows with consumption." Chen didn't respond directly. Instead, she asked, "Admiral, if there were an alternative to this surrender, would your people take it? Even if the odds seemed impossible?" The alien's chromatophores flashed a pattern the translator couldn't process, but the subsequent silence conveyed volumes. Finally, Zex Torah responded, "My responsibility is to preserve what remains of my species. False hope is crueler than honest defeat." "I didn't mention hope," Chen replied. "I asked about alternatives." The Arcturian admiral's exoskeleton straightened almost imperceptibly. "What exactly are you proposing, Captain?" Chen glanced at the incoming transmission alert on her private terminal. Earth Command had reached a decision on her earlier request. "For now, Admiral, I'm proposing only that you delay signing the surrender by 26 standard hours. Technical difficulties with your quantum arrays, perhaps." "And then?" Chen's expression remained neutral. "And then we'll see whether the universe has alternatives to offer." As the transmission ended, Chen opened Earth Command's message. The response was brief, just 5 words that would change the course of 3 civilizations. "Witness Protocol Sierra 9 authorized. Proceed." The Krell delegation arrived at the appointed hour, their ceremonial war skiffs gleaming with the polished exoskeletons of fallen Arcturian warriors. High Commander Vexker personally led the procession, his massive frame adorned with trophy organs preserved from conquered species. The message was clear: resistance ends in becoming decoration. Captain Chen and her diplomatic officer, Dr. Alejandro Reyes, observed from the designated neutral zone. Their expressions, carefully neutral as scanners hidden in their formal uniforms, catalogued every detail of Krell physiology and technology. "Where are the Arcturians?" Reyes whispered. "They're 3 hours late." "Technical difficulties," Chen replied, the ghost of a smile touching her lips. "Very unfortunate timing." The Krell commander approached the human observers, looming over them by nearly a meter. "Your presence honors us, primates. Few species witnessed 2 surrender ceremonies in their history." "2?" Reyes inquired innocently. "Theirs today, yours eventually." The Krell's translator rendered his mandible clicking as laughter. Chen met his compound eyes without flinching. "We appreciate your confidence, Commander. Humanity has much to learn from your techniques." While the delegation waited, Chen slipped away under the pretense of a communication check. In reality, she made her way to a hidden transmission point where the Krell jamming fields had a structural weakness, a flaw identified by Lieutenant Commander Imani Okafor's quantum algorithms weeks earlier. From this blind spot, Chen connected to the Arcturian command network. "Package Prometheus is transmitting now," she said into her secure comm. "You have 18 minutes before their systems detect the intrusion." Aboard the Arcturian flagship, Admiral Zex Torah personally oversaw the download of the human data package. What she found defied comprehension. Detailed schematics of Krell neural command structures, frequency vulnerabilities in their quantum shield arrays, and most critically, the synchronization keys to their hive-linked battle coordination. "This is impossible," her chief technician whispered. "No one has breached their encryption in 70 years. How did the humans?" "They watched," Zex Torah realized. "For decades, they just watched and calculated while we fought directly." The technician's chromatophores flashed warning patterns. "Admiral, implementing these exploits would violate 16 provisions of the preliminary surrender agreement, which we haven't signed," she reminded him. "Upload the package to our distributed network. Priority vessels only. Authorization. Final dawn." Back at the surrender site, the Krell commander's patience had expired. "This delay is deliberate," he snarled at Chen. "Your human interference will be remembered when we catalog your species." Chen checked her chronometer. "Perhaps communication systems were more damaged than expected during your pacification efforts." She met his gaze. "Efficient conquest requires functional infrastructure afterward, doesn't it?" Before the commander could respond, alarms blared across Krell channels. Throughout their fleet, critical systems began reporting anomalous behavior. Weapon platforms recalibrating to incorrect coordinates, shield harmonics fluctuating, and most alarmingly, their neural link battle coordination displaying impossible feedback loops. What have you done? The commander rounded on Chen, chelicerae extended in threat display. We. Chen raised an eyebrow. We're merely observers, Commander. Perhaps your systems are experiencing technical difficulties as well. In orbit, the previously dormant Arcturian vessels suddenly pulsed with renewed energy signatures. Ships believed crippled beyond recovery now showed shield regeneration and weapons charging. The Krell flagship's sensors detected the anomaly too late. A coordinated burst of precisely calibrated gravitational pulses targeted their main command node, temporarily severing the hive mind coordination that made their fleet so formidable. In the confusion, Chen's communicator chimed with a simple message from Admiral Zextora. Alternative accepted. On her command channel, Chen issued the order that would forever change humanity's stance in galactic affairs. All UEF vessels, Witness Protocol Sierra 9 is now active. Deploy the Merciless algorithm. Authorization. Chen. Verification code Thermopyla. Throughout the system, 7 seemingly insignificant human vessels activated hidden arrays, broadcasting precisely calculated interference patterns that transformed the Krell's own technology into their greatest vulnerability. The battle wasn't over. It had barely begun. Chaos erupted across the Proxima Centauri system. Krell warriors abandoned the surrender ceremony, scrambling to emergency transports as their neural implants flooded with contradictory commands. High Commander Vexker stumbled, his magnificent ceremonial armor suddenly weighing him down as integrated control systems misfired. This is a declaration of war. He snarled at Chen as his personal guard formed a protective circle around him. She watched him calmly, hands clasped behind her back. No, Commander. This is an intervention. You think 7 patrol vessels can challenge the Dominion? His mandibles clicked in what the translator rendered as derisive laughter. We didn't bring warships, Chen replied. We brought mathematics. Aboard the UEF Indomitable, Lieutenant Commander Okafor sat cross-legged in the ship's quantum computation chamber, her consciousness partly merged with the algorithmic warfare systems. Neural bridges allowed her to directly perceive the data streams flowing between Krell ships, identifying patterns and vulnerabilities faster than any conventional system. Their adaptive countermeasures are initiating, she reported, voice eerily harmonized with the ship's eye. We're routing attack vectors through tertiary exploits. They're elegant, almost beautiful in their desperation. Throughout the system, the 7 human vessels maintained precise positions, each broadcasting a portion of the complex interference pattern that exploited fundamental flaws in Krell technology. They fired no weapons, launched no fighters. They simply transmitted data that turned the enemy's own systems against them. On the planet's surface, Dr. Rice approached the confused Krell delegation with a formal diplomatic datavat. High Commander, Captain Chen extends an invitation to discussion aboard our vessel to resolve this misunderstanding. Misunderstanding. A Krell sub-commander advanced menacingly. Your species has committed suicide today. Ray smiled pleasantly. Actually, we've initiated peace negotiations. The invitation includes quantum-secure transit for your delegation and diplomatic immunity guarantees under Earth interstellar protocols. The audacity stunned the Krell into momentary silence. Meanwhile, Admiral Zextora directed the reactivated Arcturian fleet with newfound purpose. The human algorithm hadn't simply disabled Krell systems. It had revealed structural weaknesses in their formation and command structure that a century of direct combat had never exposed. Focus fire on these coordinates, she ordered, indicating nodes where Krell ships clustered in disarray. Minimal yield, maximum frequency disruption. We're not seeking destruction, just paralysis. For the first time in generations, Arcturian weapons fire struck Krell vessels with precision and effect. Shield frequencies destabilized under coordinated assault. Propulsion systems locked into emergency protocols. The invincible armada that had systematically dismantled the Arcturian civilization now found itself unable to maintain basic defensive formations. Aboard the Indomitable, Chen received the first damage reports with grim satisfaction. Phase 1 complete, she noted. Begin transmission of diplomatic conditions. Throughout the system, all operational communication arrays began broadcasting a simple message on frequencies both species could receive. The United Earth Federation recognizes neither the validity of forced surrender under duress nor the legitimacy of genocidal conquest. We propose immediate cessation of hostilities and negotiation of sustainable terms that preserve both civilizations. High Commander Vexcare, having finally been convinced to accept the human invitation, materialized in the Indomitable's diplomatic chamber. His fury was palpable, mandibles clicking rapidly enough that the translator struggled to keep pace. "You understand nothing of our ways," he hissed. "The Krell Dominion has conquered 1,000 worlds. We do not negotiate with prey species." Chen activated the chamber's holographic system. It displayed not military threats or posturing, but something far more terrifying to the Krell commander. Detailed simulations of systematic Krell societal collapse based on precise resource allocation models. "Commander," Chen said quietly, "you misunderstand our position. We're not negotiating with you." She gestured to the hologram. "We're saving you from yourselves." The Krell's compound eyes widened as he recognized the truth in the projections. His empire's expansion model was fundamentally unsustainable, a fact his own scientists had hidden for generations. "This," Chen said, "is the true hand of mercy." High Commander Vexcare studied the holographic projections with mounting horror. Resource depletion curves, genetic bottleneck simulations, and insurgency probability maps all converged toward the same inevitable conclusion. The Krell Dominion's expansion model would collapse within 3 generations. "These projections are human fabrications," he finally declared, though his secondary mandibles twitched in the Krell equivalent of uncertainty. Captain Chen nodded to Dr. Reyes, who silently transmitted a second data package. "These are your own internal projections, Commander. Your science ministries have been warning leadership for decades, but your conquest doctrine classified the information as demoralizing." The Krell's compound eyes dilated in shock as he recognized authentically encrypted Dominion data classifications. "How did you obtain this?" "Our quantum vaults are impenetrable." "We didn't hack your vaults," Chen explained. "We simply observe your resource acquisition patterns across 83 star systems over 43 years and ran the numbers ourselves. Mathematics is universal, Commander." Throughout the Proxima system, the effects of the Merciless algorithm continued to unfold. Krell ships found themselves locked in recursive command loops or executing contradictory maneuvers. Their famed neural net tactical systems, designed to distribute command functions should leadership be compromised, now worked against them, propagating errors system-wide. Lieutenant Commander Okafor maintained her neural link with the algorithm. Her consciousness expanded across multiple quantum-entangled fields. Through the ship's intercom, her voice echoed with harmonic undertones as the computing system spoke through her. "They're attempting to sever network connections and revert to manual control," she reported. "Executing Countermeasure Suite Epsilon 7. Throughout the Krell fleet, emergency override protocols suddenly activated, forcing reconnection to the compromised network. Security measures designed to prevent mutiny now ensured complete vulnerability." "You fight without honor," the High Commander accused, regaining some composure. "Without weapons." Chen's expression remained neutral. "We fight without bloodshed whenever possible. The algorithm targets only your capacity to harm others, not your people themselves. Your mercy is more humiliating than defeat," Vexcare hissed. "That," Chen replied softly, "is precisely why it works." Meanwhile, Admiral Zextora coordinated the Arcturian counteroffensive with strategic precision. Following human tactical guidelines transmitted alongside the algorithm, her forces targeted communication hubs rather than weapons platforms, propulsion inhibitors rather than life support. "Status report," she demanded as the first wave completed. 83% of Krell heavy cruisers immobilized. Tactical networks disrupted across all sectors. Minimal casualties on either side. Her tactical officer reported with disbelief coloring her harmonic speech patterns. This isn't conquest, Zextora realized aloud. It's pacification. Back aboard the Indomitable, Chen received word that 17 additional human vessels had arrived at the system's edge. Not warships, but humanitarian cruisers equipped with advanced medical facilities, cultural preservation vaults, and ecological restoration equipment. You came prepared for aftermath, not battle, the Krell commander observed. War is easy, Chen replied. Peace requires preparation. A sudden alert drew their attention. Throughout the system, Krell ships began broadcasting emergency signals on all frequencies. Their life support systems were failing as the algorithm's cascade effect reached critical thresholds. You promised no bloodshed. Vexcare's accusation carried genuine fear. Chen immediately opened a communication channel. Okafor, life support systems are compromised. Initiate Protocol Sanctuary immediately. The lieutenant commander's voice came through, still resonating with algorithmic harmonics. Already implemented, Captain. Rerouting emergency power to Krell life support through their auxiliary systems. Casualties projected at less than 0.2%. A high commander watched in confusion as human tactical decisions prioritized saving Krell lives over pressing their advantage. I don't understand your strategy, he admitted. That, Chen replied, is why you were losing even before we arrived. She gestured to the holographic display, which now showed a third projection, a sustainable model of coexistence where both Krell and Arcturian civilizations survived and eventually thrived through collaborative development. This is the true Merciless algorithm, Commander. It eliminates not enemy combatants, but the very concept of necessary conflict. Your entire strategy is flawed, High Commander Vexcar declared after studying the coexistence model. Predators and prey cannot share resources equally. Nature itself disproves your theory. Chen gestured, and a holographic display shifted to Earth's historical archives. The brutal images of humanity's past unfolded in chronological sequence. Tribal warfare, medieval brutality, industrialized killing, atomic devastation, and genocides that made even the Krell commander's mandibles twitch uncomfortably. You think we don't understand predation? Chen asked quietly. We perfected it on ourselves first. The display continued, showing technologies of death that the Krell had never conceived. Cobalt bombs designed to render planets uninhabitable for centuries, engineered plagues targeting specific genetic markers, autonomous killing machines programmed to maximize suffering before termination. These weapons, Chen continued, were developed before we reached the stars. Not to fight aliens, but to use against other humans. The commander's compound eyes widened. Then you are natural conquerors. Why resist our similar ambitions? Because we learned what you haven't yet discovered. Chen changed the display again, showing Earth's great transition, the resource wars that nearly ended human civilization, followed by the unification, the climate restoration, and finally, the emergence of a society that had channeled its predatory instincts into creation rather than destruction. We didn't evolve beyond our nature, Chen explained. We transcended it by understanding it. The predator who consumes its entire ecosystem ultimately starves. In orbit above Proxima Centauri IV, Lieutenant Commander Okafor finally disengaged from the neural interface, her consciousness returning fully to her physical form. Medical staff immediately surrounded her, monitoring for synaptic strain and cognitive dissonance. How bad is it out there? She asked, blinking away the lingering quantum overlap perceptions. Chief Medical Officer Yamamoto checked her neural readings. The algorithm is self-sustaining now. Krell systems are paralyzed but stabilized. Life support holding across their fleet. Okafor nodded weakly. They're more flexible thinkers than we anticipated. Already developing novel countermeasures. Impressive. Rest, Yamamoto ordered. You've been in deep interface for 14 hours. Can't, she mumbled. Need to monitor adaptive response patterns. Despite her protestations, exhaustion claimed her, and she slipped into recovery sleep. On the devastated surface of the once vibrant Arcturian colony world, Dr. Rice led a combined team of human and Arcturian specialists through the ruins. Their mission wasn't military but humanitarian, deploying atmospheric scrubbers to begin removing Krell bombardment toxins and setting up preliminary environmental restoration pods. An elderly Arcturian scientist, her exoskeleton bearing the scars of decades of warfare, watched the humans work with incomprehension. Why expend resources on a dead world? She asked Rice. The ecosystem collapse has passed critical thresholds. Rice calibrated an atmospheric sampler before answering. Humanity nearly destroyed our homeworld 3 times before we learned regenerative techniques. This damage is severe but reversible. The Arcturians' chromatophores flashed skepticism patterns. You would restore our worlds without claiming them. The only thing we claim, Rice replied, is the right to prevent extinction. Yours, theirs, or any sentient species. Back aboard the Indomitable, the diplomatic standoff continued. High Commander Vexcar studied the humans with growing fascination and dread. Your species frightens me more now than when I believed you were simply conquerors, he admitted. You possess weapons that could destroy us utterly, yet you choose the more difficult path of preservation. Why? Chen considered her answer carefully. The difference between humans and most species we've encountered is simple. We've already seen our worst possible selves. We've stood at the precipice of self-extinction and stepped back. What terrifies you, Commander, isn't our technology or our interference. It's that we represent the future your own species must embrace to survive. The Krell commander's posture shifted subtly, the first indication of consideration rather than defiance. Show me, he said finally, this future you claim is possible. The Proxima Centauri system, hours earlier a battlefield, had transformed into something unprecedented. A diplomatic crucible where 3 civilizations with vastly different evolutionary histories attempted reconciliation. Captain Chen had arranged for the negotiations to take place on neutral ground, a modular facility hastily constructed on Proxima's outermost moon, far from the recent devastation. Admiral Zex Tora arrived with her delegation first, her chromophores still pulsing with wariness and residual battle readiness. This is folly, she muttered to Chen as they awaited the Krell. They cannot be trusted to honor any agreement. Perhaps, Chen acknowledged. But even temporary peace creates opportunity for permanent solutions. When High Commander Vexcar entered with his advisors, tension electrified the chamber. Many Arcturians instinctively shifted to defensive postures, their exoskeletons bristling with alert patterns. The Krell delegation's mandibles clicked in agitation, compound eyes scanning for threats. Dr. Rice, serving as chief mediator, activated the central holographic display. Before we begin formal negotiations, we've prepared an assessment of the current situation and potential paths forward. The display showed 3 orbital projections, one depicting continued conflict and mutual destruction, one showing Krell dominance leading to eventual resource collapse, and one illustrating a collaborative model with initial hardship transitioning to sustainable prosperity for both species. The choice, Rice concluded, belongs to you both. Humans will neither decide nor impose outcomes. For 12 tense hours, the negotiations proceeded in fits and starts. Ancient grievances and fresh atrocities repeatedly derailed progress. More than once, delegations stormed out, only to return when alternative options proved non-existent. As the 3rd cycle of talks neared collapse, Lieutenant Sophia Okafor, Imani's sister and the Indomitable's cultural specialist, requested permission to address both delegations. My ancestors lived through Earth's resource wars, she began, displaying personal images rather than historical archives. This was my great-grandmother's village before targeted bombings. These were my family members executed for belonging to the wrong ethnic group. Her presentation continued, showing atrocities committed against her lineage. And then, unexpectedly, shifting to reconciliation councils where victims and perpetrators work together to rebuild. What made this possible wasn't forgetting, she explained, but remembering with purpose. My family chose to transform memory into restoration rather than vengeance. Her words penetrated where technical arguments had failed. An elderly Arcturian diplomat, chromatophores glowing with emotion, addressed the Krell directly. "We cannot forget our dead worlds or murdered children. But perhaps we can remember them by building something neither of us could create alone." Gradually, remarkably, the outlines of an agreement emerged, a phased withdrawal of Krell forces from Arcturian core systems, supervised disarmament of planet-killer weaponry on both sides, establishment of joint research initiatives, focusing first on ecological restoration, and most controversially, a genetic preservation program to save critically endangered Arcturian subspecies without compromising Krell security concerns. When High Commander Vexcare objected that his people would never accept such compromises, Chen implemented the final component of Earth's intervention strategy. With his reluctant permission, humanity broadcast the full sustainability simulations throughout Krell territory, bypassing military sensors to reach civilian populations directly. The response stunned even the commander. Across Krell worlds, civilian councils and resource management castes, long silenced by military dominance, voiced immediate support for sustainable alternatives to endless conquest. "Your people aren't as unified in conquest doctrine as you believed," Chen observed. "They've been waiting for permission to consider alternatives." The fragile peace of Proxima took shape in the final document, not as surrender or victory for either side, but as mutual recognition of existential interdependence. As Admiral Zex Tora and Commander Vexcare simultaneously pressed their biological signatures to the accord, Chen stepped back, her mission transitioning from intervention to support. "There will be resistance," Dr. Rice warned quietly. "Hardliners on both sides." "Of course," Chen replied. "Peace is never a moment. It's a process." But they've taken the first step themselves. For the first time in a century, the battle was truly over. 3 weeks after the Peace of Proxima was signed, Captain Chen found herself summoned to an unprecedented joint session of the newly formed Arcturian Krell Cooperative Council. The council had established temporary headquarters on a previously uninhabited moon at the system's edge, neutral territory that belonged to neither civilization. She arrived to find both species' senior representatives waiting, their body language betraying the shared unease that transcended their biological differences. Admiral Zex Tora's chromatophores pulsed with urgency patterns, while Commander Vexcare's compound eyes remained fixed on the central display. "Captain," the Admiral began, "our combined scientific teams have been reviewing the data your quantum specialists shared during the peace negotiations. We've discovered inconsistencies." Chen maintained her composed expression. "What kind of inconsistencies?" Commander Vexcare stepped forward. "Your sustainability models included variables our analysts couldn't initially decode. When we finally isolated them, we found something disturbing." He activated the chamber's holographic system. A three-dimensional map of the Milky Way materialized, with a pulsing anomaly highlighted at its core. "This energy signature," he continued, mandibles clicking in agitation, "was embedded in your calculations, yet you never explicitly mentioned it during negotiations." Chen studied the display without surprise. "You weren't ready to hear it then." "Hear what?" Admiral Zex Tora demanded, her exoskeleton bristling. "That your intervention wasn't humanitarian at all. That you had ulterior motives." "Our intervention was necessary regardless," Chen replied, gesturing toward the galactic visualization. "But yes, there was another factor." She interfaced with the holographic controls, expanding the anomaly and advancing its temporal projection. The simulation showed a massive energy buildup in the galactic core, culminating in a directional discharge that swept through the Orion arm like a scythe. "Our quantum telescopes detected this anomaly 23 years ago," Chen explained. "It's a precursor to a gamma-ray burst of unprecedented magnitude. According to our most conservative models, it will sterilize approximately 38% of the Orion arm within the next 70 to 90 years. Silence engulfed the chamber as both alien leaders processed the implications. The projected path swept directly through both their territories. "This," "This cannot be accurate," the Admiral finally said, her voice modulator struggling to convey her shock. "Such an event would render your century-long war completely irrelevant," Chen finished gently. "Yes." The Krell commander's posture shifted from accusatory to analytical. "You intervened because our conflict was preventing preparation for this greater threat." Chen nodded. Resources that could have been directed toward survival were being consumed by mutual destruction. We needed both your civilizations intact and cooperative, not decimated or subjugated. Why not simply tell us this from the beginning? Admiral Zex Tora demanded. "Would either of you have believed us?" Chen asked. "Or would you have seen it as a transparent manipulation by an untested species trying to influence galactic politics?" Neither alien leader answered, their silence confirmation enough. Chen continued, "Humanity has faced extinction-level threats before, some cosmic, many self-inflicted. We've learned that preparation requires more than technology. It demands psychological readiness and social cohesion." She expanded the display further, revealing a comprehensive defense strategy, a massive network of interconnected shield installations positioned throughout the threatened regions, requiring resources and expertise from multiple civilizations. "This is why we came," she said simply. "Not because we're noble or merciful, but because survival, yours, ours, everyone's, depends on cooperation across species boundaries. The universe doesn't care about our conflicts. It kills indiscriminately." Commander Vexkar studied the human with newfound respect. "Your intervention wasn't an act of charity. It was coldly calculated survival strategy." "Yes," Chen acknowledged, "though we prefer the term enlightened self-interest." Admiral Zextora's chromatophores shifted through complex emotional patterns before settling into an expression humans had never observed before. "You manipulated us into peace. We created conditions where peace became the only rational choice," Chen corrected. "The merciless truth is that none of us can afford the luxury of traditional conflicts anymore." The alien leaders exchanged glances, centuries of evolutionary hostility, momentarily suspended by shared existential concern. "What happens now?" the Admiral asked. Chen gestured to the shield network design. "Now we build. Together." 4 years after the revelations at Proxima Centauri, a massive structure orbited the system's outermost gas giant. Nexus Station represented an engineering triumph once thought impossible, a joint creation of human, Arcturian, and Krell design that housed over 12,000 scientists and engineers from 17 different species. Admiral Maya Chen, promoted after the successful intervention, stood on the station's observation deck watching final preparations for the shield test. Below, a barren moon had been selected as the proving ground for technology that might determine the fate of countless worlds. "Commencing test sequence in 2 minutes," announced the station's Trispices eye in perfect harmonics for all present life forms. Beside Chen stood Admiral Zex Tora, her once battle-scarred exoskeleton now bearing the intricate markings of the Arcturian Scientific Council, the ceremonial patterns intertwined with human mathematical symbols, a personal tribute to the unexpected alliance. On Chen's other side, former High Commander Vexkar, now the Krell ambassador for interspecies cooperation, clicked his mandibles nervously. His genetic lineage had ruled Krell conquest fleets for 9 generations. Now his descendants would become known for something entirely different. "The latest calibrations from your quantum specialists have been integrated," Zex Tora noted, her chromatophores pulsing with cautious optimism. "This configuration should hold against 18% more radiation than previous tests." The shield prototype represented technologies from dozens of worlds. Arcturian crystalline matrices provided the structural foundation. Krell quantum harmonizers stabilized the energy flow. Human algorithmic systems coordinated the impossibly complex interactions between components. No single species could have created it alone. "Initiating shield generation," announced the AI. Below them, thousands of synchronized nodes activated simultaneously on the moon's surface. Energy coalesced into a shimmering dome that expanded rapidly, eventually enveloping the entire celestial body in a barely perceptible iridescent field. Throughout the station, scientists from species that once fought proxy wars against each other now held their breath collectively. Some had sensory organs entirely different from eyes, yet all focused their attention on the same phenomenon, the barrier between life and extinction. Commencing radiation bombardment, the AI continued. 5% capacity. Carefully calibrated emitters bombarded the shield with radiation equivalent to the initial wave of a gamma-ray burst. The shield fluctuated but stabilized, its quantum matrix adjusting in real time to the assault. 10% capacity. The shield's iridescence intensified, patterns of energy redistribution visible even to unaugmented human vision. 20% capacity. At this intensity, previous prototypes had failed catastrophically. The observation deck fell silent as the shield's harmonics reached frequencies that made Krell mandibles vibrate involuntarily. 30% capacity. A ripple of excitement passed through the assembled scientists as the shield continued to hold. Senior researchers exchanged meaningful glances. This was already beyond their most optimistic projections. 50% capacity. The shield's quantum matrix began showing signs of strain, fluctuation patterns emerging at the polar regions, yet it persisted, adapting to each new intensity level. 75% capacity. A subsection failed, creating a momentary breach before secondary systems compensated. The triumph wasn't perfect, but it was unprecedented. Test concluded. Shield integrity at 72%. Spontaneous celebrations erupted throughout the station, multiple species expressing joy in ways that would have seemed alien and incomprehensible to each other years earlier. Ambassador Vexcar turned to Admiral Chen, his compound eyes reflecting the shield's fading glow. Will it be enough when the actual burst comes? Not yet, Chen answered honestly. But 4 years ago, we had nothing. Today we have this. She gestured to the moon below and the diverse gathering around them. The shield is only part of what we're building. A young lieutenant approached with an urgent data packet. Chen reviewed it silently, her expression revealing nothing even as the implications registered. The gravitational anomalies at the galactic core had accelerated. Their models had been too conservative. The burst would arrive within 18 months, not decades. Without hesitation, she shared the data with her alien colleagues. Years of cooperation had built trust where once only suspicion existed. We must accelerate deployment, Vexcar said immediately, calculating resources with the efficiency that once made his species such formidable conquerors. The timeline is impossible, countered Zextora, her chromatophores pulsing with stress patterns. We would need to triple production capacity. Chen's calm voice cut through their rising concern. Then we will do the impossible, because extinction is not an option. She moved to the station's command center and opened channels to every participating world. The message was brief. Timeline accelerated. Full deployment within 12 months. All resources committed. As emergency protocols activated throughout the station, Chen returned to the viewport. The stars beyond no longer represented wonder or conquest, or even scientific curiosity. They were now a countdown clock, their light reaching them from a past that had already determined their future. Zextora joined her, 4 eyes focused on the same distant points of light. How do you maintain such certainty in the face of impossible odds? Chen's answer came without hesitation. Because humans have faced extinction repeatedly, by our own hands, and by cosmic indifference. Each time, we discovered that survival isn't about strength or dominance. It's about adaptation and cooperation. She turned from the stars to the bustling station around them. Former enemies now working side by side against a common threat. This, she said simply, is humanity's true gift to the galaxy. Not our technology or our algorithms, but the understanding that life, any life, is worth fighting for, even when the battle seems already lost.